Hello, my little sausage McMuffins, and tonight I am going to be concentrating on those little trees. Now, when I say trees, that can mean a couple of different things, right? We're talking about single trees, we could be talking about tree clusters, and ultimately forests. There are different types of trees, such as evergreen, and they could be drawn very differently. In fact, what I should add to that is evergreen, dead, different seasons, and so on. There are parks, and there are potentially gardens, and all of these I'm going to just group together under the umbrella, as it were, of foliage. And maybe perhaps this is what this should be called: foliage part 1. And I'm going to focus for now on the single trees, and we're going to talk not only like my drawing technique, but how I think about placing them and so on and so forth. Okay, we are going to cover the other subjects boom 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 in videos right after this one. Okay, like pow pow pow, a little jab, a little hook. That's what we're going to be doing right here. Let's just make sure that is not a good brush for drawing trees, so let's just get into a little bit more of a basic brush. Let's bring our size down to, I don't know, something like 8 thereabouts. And let's talk about single trees. Now, I'm not going to be talking about sort of trees in this sort of style where we're kind of like looking at them almost from the side, right? We're not doing that. I did that very early on in my portraying, and there was at least a video and a written guide on it, and I talk about the colouring and my techniques and different types of trees. If you're interested in that sort of Lord of the Rings bird's eye view look, go check them out. Okay, sign up on my Patreon, ping me, say you're signing up because of this here, and I will make sure that you get that guide. Okay, so that's it. I'm going to be doing it more in the context of how to draw cities. And cities aren't just about buildings and streets and things like that. Because most cities, certainly outside of them, have some foliage, right? So let's take a look at the graveyard that we were working on in the last video. And let's kind of just like go down the road a little bit. In fact, you know what I should be doing? Hold on a sec. Hold on. Let's come back over here and let's add to our list. Let's get in here too that we want to do farms. I need to cover farms with you guys and girls too, right? Oh yeah, dead trees. You could almost hear my brain turn off. Okay, so like sort of dead trees, and I'll do seasons too. Okay, something like that. And oops, hit escape before you hit the V, and let's just put that there. This is going to be like our to-do list, okay? In the meantime, we're sticking with those little tiny individual trees. So let's turn them off, because that's the episode that we're doing right here. Now, I've kind of almost, well, I have done one or two, because I tend to draw them as I'm drawing other things. But let's sort of take a look at my style here. So you're drawing little clouds. That's how I've likened it, okay? Okay, what is a tree from above? If not, where's my tree? There we go. If not a shape like that. Or this, if it's a little smaller. Or maybe this, and a couple of smaller ones around it. But what I also like to do is, I'm going to zoom in a little bit here, is I tend to sort of think about a light source coming in from this angle. It's just that's the angle I do 99% of the time. And so trees also have foliage on the top, right? I mean, of course they do. They have leaves and branches and things like that. So you could totally do them like that right there. Alternatively, and I'm actually going to make this a touch smaller. There we go. Alternatively, if I did a tree like this, instead of doing all of that extra sort of the crown of the tree evenly across the whole surface, I tend to focus more in the bottom right corner because of the light source direction, right? We will also be coloring this, and we'll get a little drop shadow and things like that. Now, this is really, honestly, the sum total of how I draw an individual tree. My logic for placement along a roadside like this is I'd like to sort of break up the road itself. I kind of place into these gaps. Sometimes maybe even doing like a little small copse of trees. You'll notice that I tend to then do little dots kind of coming off, little sort of like this. What are they? They're little bushes. A little bit of a shrubbery, as it were. Small trees, saplings, grass, underneath and around the tree. That's ultimately what these are. Because, I mean, yeah, you could get a tree in the middle of nowhere like that, but, you know, there's probably going to be a little bit of grass or something around it as well. So I tend to just do that as I go. And ultimately, you do this all over, by the way, we're going to see no white anywhere on this by the time we're done. That's one of the hallmarks. I kind of do the texture as we go. All of the white gets textured ultimately at the end of the day. Now, that's great. Individual little trees like that totally works. One thing also to think about with doing individual trees is nothing stops you doing them in the town proper. Let's, you know what, let's come in and draw, let's draw like just a building or two right here. This is not a building sort of episode, but let's kind of get ourselves a little tiny courtyard of sorts. Something like this. And maybe here we'll do insinuation like maybe a little shop or something. And here we'll kind of do a little roof coming off. This is just all rough down and dirty. But if I do something like this, in the center here, you put a statue, you can put a little pond, water, something like that. It wouldn't be a pond, it'd be a fountain, right? But you get the idea. But you could also throw in a little tree. Just an individual tree. And by the way, when I do this, I do less of this because those little dots insinuate grass, shrubs, etc. But this here, I want to be a little bit more manicured. This tree is maybe in just a little bit of a brick sort of surround, right? And there's less growth going on elsewhere, so I'll get rid of all of that, and I'll just have a tree in the middle of the courtyard. A couple of trees inside your city goes a long way. Later on, we're going to expand upon that. We're going to do gardens and we're going to do parks, okay? Because cities have those things. And believe me, when you have like brick and slate and things like that everywhere in your city when you're doing the colouring, when you've got a splash of green here and there, it goes a long, long way. But let's stick outside for a moment. How do we now take these individual little trees and buddy them up with other trees and make small copses and forests? Well, I'm glad you asked, young Padawan, because we're going to take this area up here. And if you were watching this since episode 1, I love you, you little stud, you. But also, you will remember that I said that this was going to be a big forest up here, right? Now, I'm not going to draw it all here on camera today because a forest this big will take a long time, but I am going to show you the principle by which I work. First and foremost, let's go kind of here-ish. So, I'm going to do the same principle as an individual tree, like this. Let me zoom in. But I'm actually not going to finish it. And you'll notice I'm kind of doing the crown of the tree at the same time like this. Maybe I'll just do an individual one right there, but I'm going to revert straight back. And it's almost like I'm doing lots of individual part trees. Right? You see that? I'm not even doing a full half. In some instances, it's just a quarter, maybe a third. Now, one good result from doing it this way is you see how I kind of like do, you know, this and I do this, and I've created that little path going in between the treetops there, and you can maybe finish it like so, and you got this interesting little area going in. And the purpose and reason why I do that is if you did this, sure, you could do that, Color it, maybe add a little bit of crown sort of texturing, etc. on the top, and bish bash bosh, job done. But it's gonna look boring, okay? You can't do that all of the time. Go the extra length. And there's a couple of things you can do to make your big forests super, super sexy, right? One is create these little paths coming in. And you'll notice I'll change the direction occasionally. I'll force my own hand by throwing in just a random tree in the middle of it there. Again, I'm just doing little tiny trees, stopping partway through. But ultimately, it's like I'm drawing a squiggly line, right? That's kind of what I'm doing here. Let's make this interesting. Suddenly, our path becomes a bisected path. Let's stick with that. See how much more interesting this is than just going whoa with a big, huge line? This is like so much more fun, much more visually interesting, and by God, you little Padawans, you should know at this point, it is all about creating interesting maps. What do I keep on saying? Create interesting stories in what you're drawing. You want players and GMs alike to look at your maps and go, ooh, what's there? And if you do a forest like that, they are not going to do it, because that's just a blob of green. Yes, do they understand it's a forest? Yes, of course they absolutely do. But if you do something like this, I'm creating little pathways in this forest. This is way more than just a forest now. I'm actually sowing the seeds of adventure right here. Do you understand just how much more that is from just a forest at this point? And it doesn't really matter if the GM does something with it or not. You're sowing possibilities. And is that not the hobby that we're in? Adventure, imagination, possibilities. What's down this path? What's down this road? That's what it's all about. And I'll just finish off this sort of area right here. Kind of give you an idea. So, one thing I also love to do is, let's just force our little path here. Let's just create a little path, and we'll make that one a dead end. I'm actually going to open this up. Let's create a little bit of a clearing. Half trees, half little clouds. That's all we're doing here. I'll create and leave room for maybe an exit over there. We'll come back to that. We'll do something fun with it later on. By the way, this coloured, it's going to blow your mind. It's going to blow your mind. I think maybe what we'll do in the next episode is maybe even a how-to colour, before we move on to the next type of trees and foliage types. Because I love colouring trees. Why? They add so much super sexy green to the map. And you get all of the canopy and the texturing, and you get the drop shadow, and suddenly, oof, you have some serious sex on the page. I'm just saying. Now, I don't like to go too heavy. I do tend to still kind of focus in the bottom right, as I spoke about before, but not exclusively. I'm going to create the canopy by doing disconnected little half clouds, right? You see how this here, by the way, kind of almost looks too dark now compared to everything else? I'm going to lighten that up a little bit. Don't do them too close. I tend to do them a little denser as I get towards the edges of the trees. Otherwise, it's really just about adding that darling little touch of texture. Something like this. Alright, let's not go too deep with this because we've still got a whole bunch of forest to do. But do you see how interesting that is to look at? One thing. I created this here, and you could totally just fill that now with a little bit of grass sort of texturing. Nothing wrong with that at all. You could also maybe just draw a little building in the middle of this right here. Maybe with a little outbuilding. You don't need to know what that is. You don't even need to have a number next to that. What does that do as a player or a GM when you see it? It's a plot hook, it is a seed, it is an area to go explore. The players are sort of saying, is there a druid in town? The GM can immediately turn around and go, well, actually, I'm glad you asked, and point to that location right there. And later on, it will take a similar sort of principle with this, of this creating interest in your maps, and we'll create a little logging camp, but we'll kind of probably do that a little bit further on and there with the city over here. But you see what I'm saying? Look how that is visually interesting. You kind of want to walk those paths already. You're kind of pointing to an area and going, what's that? And if you can get that trifecta of interesting, you want to walk those paths, and oh, what is that? If you can do that, your map is a winner. Okay, is an absolute winner. A couple of things that I would recommend too when you're doing some things like this is I like to do just some almost filtering out or phasing out of the forest a little bit, where it just doesn't end dead with these trees here. I kind of have some shrubs, small trees, insinuation of grass, that type of thing. Maybe a little copse nearby. And it looks more realistic. Do you see the difference that makes? It's less black and white, and it's way more, the trees are turning into tall grasses and shrubs, and then off into whatever lies beyond them. We'll probably do some farmland or something like that. So take that extra length to do this type of thing as well. I call it like sort of feathering, almost you're feathering it out, right? Now, before we end this video though, let's talk about taking that principle and doing a copse of trees. Because you've got the individuals, like so, right? There are our individual trees. There's our little bushes and lumps of grass. This is going to be a big, huge forest. Well, what about an in-between? Same principle. Same principle. But you don't have to necessarily create all sorts of paths, etc. Because now this is just a copse of trees all growing together. But I'm going to approach it like a small forest. I'm just going to do these half little clouds. All of these trees kind of bunching together. Going to add our canopy. I tend to start on the outside where it's a little thicker. Not the canopy in real life, but I like to put the textures a little bit thicker. And I like to thin it down as I come towards the top, because it helps with the light hitting the top of the treetops, right? I mean, if you think about, like, you know, let's say this is a forest. Like, yeah, like in a true forest, maybe there might be light here, light here, light here, light here. You know, you get the sort of general idea. But if I want to insinuate like a 3D-ness, my shadows are going to be kind of like down here away from the canopy top, which is why I tend to focus my texturing on the outside edges, and I get thinner and thinner towards the top there. If you look at any of my forestry, it all works that same way. I get thinner and thinner towards the top. That way it looks lighter and lighter as I come towards the top. And the shadowing and the thickness, so to speak, of ink is further away towards the edges. Take a look at that. Now imagine we do the whole forest that way, and we're going to. That becomes a really interesting part of the map. And we were just drawing trees. That's what I'm talking about right there. That's the excitement, and that's what I want you to do with your maps. So in the next episode, probably in between episodes, I'll try and finish that canopy area. Who knows? We'll endeavour to anyway. We'll finish it up on camera with some of the details, such as maybe the logging camp and things like that. And we will move on to the next type of foliage that you can add to your city. If you found this enjoyable, please do let me know down in the comments below. If you want me to cover any particular subject, but how would you draw this? I want to hear it. Let me know down in the comments below. And if this is the type of thing you have a lot of fun with, you would like to know more, please consider having a look at my Patreon link, patreon.com/Alyssa Faden. I will love you Well, I was going to say love you long time, but that would be inappropriate. Anyway, you get the idea. Thanks everyone for watching. Truly appreciate it. I'm going to see you on the flip side.